54%. I want you to hold on to that number for a moment. As I'm speaking, Jason Chaffetz, former kicker for the Cougars at BYU, Jason Chaffetz is holding a hearing in Washington, U.S. House of Representatives, and Representative Chaffetz is actually speaking with James Comey, the director of the FBI. Don't expect Comey's going to come out and say, they threatened me, I had to do it. But wouldn't it be cool if he did? And then just suddenly blew the cover off the ball at this point? As you know, Mr. Comey came out and did a news conference the other day, and while he does not, he's the investigator. The indictments would come from the Attorney General's office. He said, we do not recommend indictment. And the Attorney General said, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, I can keep Bill Clinton happy now after his visit last week when he told me that we shouldn't do it. And that was the end of it. Here's a poll that is being reported by the Washington Examiner. 54% wanted Hillary indicted, including 25% of Democrats. Wow. For you liberals out there, that means 1 out of 4 of your own kind. Get that? Yeah, 25% means a quarter. That is 1 out of 4. Rasmussen reports found that 37% of likely voters agreed with the FBI move. That's a little more than 1/3. 54% disagreed, and 10% were undecided. Those 10% hopefully will not go out and vote. They're the people that get interviewed on all the boardwalks around the country. What country did the United States win its independence from? Mongolia? Yeah, those people. Right, the useless eaters. It says the poll of 10,000 or 1,000, was taken Tuesday night after the FBI's press conference. Among Democrats, about 2/3, that's 64%, agreed to let Clinton off with some tough words, but 25% disagreed. Among Republicans, 4 out of 5 wanted an indictment. No kidding. So did independents at 63%. That's 2/3. Got it? So there you have it. A lot of Americans. If Donald Trump plays his cards right, the man could actually start making some hay with all of this. I wanted to mention Trump just briefly, if I could, off the top of the show today. In my little pregame warm-up, which I do on Facebook, I was referencing this. There is a story in the Washington Times today, and I've seen these reported before, that Americans more and more get their news from sources that back up their worldview. Now, that upsets liberals who have had control of the media for most of the history of this country. But now, because of all of the alternative choices we have with 500 TV channels and the internet, which provides us with an incredible amount of choices, people can actually go to the Washington Times, which is a mouthpiece for conservatives in Washington, as is the Washington Examiner, as is the Washington Free Beacon. Combined, though, none of them still have the readership of the Washington Post and WashingtonPost.com, the Post known to many people as Pravda on the Potomac, which is a flaming liberal newspaper. I think most of you are aware of that, too. A writer at the Washington Post by the name of David, and I believe he pronounces the last name Weigel, is writing today, and he says that newspapers like his own and the rest of the liberal media, because of Donald Trump, they reported about a story about Donald Trump a couple of days ago, they have once again proven to the public that they are nothing but shills for the Democrat Party. And what he's talking about, Trump was making remarks, if you recall, a couple of nights ago in North Carolina after Comey came out with his report. And Trump said, if there was one thing that Saddam Hussein did well, he killed terrorists. Which, by the way, as a statement is true. He did kill terrorists. If you were a terrorist in Iraq, you had a very short shelf life. And he pointed out there were not even any trials, that they just shot them. They got rid of them. You know, if a guy was running down the street screaming, Allahu Akbar, bang! Nobody pulled him aside and said, well, we're going to take you over to the courthouse, and in 6 months we'll have deliberations, and you'll have a court-appointed lawyer, and then you can go down to Gitmo and eat ice cream sandwiches and watch Chuck Norris videos and play soccer. And eventually Mr. Obama will allow you to go down to South America, and then you can escape and fight again on another day, on another battlefield. And Trump is simply telling you the truth. And yet, media jumped all over that story, as did Hillary Clinton saying, Donald Trump, well, she would say it more like this. That's what it sounds like when she talks. I'm sorry, but that's exactly what I hear when I listen. So she made all of this noise and saying Donald Trump is an admirer of Saddam Hussein. How could you ever elect him president? And media started drumbeating that as well. Except that Trump has been saying this for a year. He said it in Republican primary debates. He's been saying it at rallies for the past 12 months, and yet nobody covered it to the extent it suddenly got covered. And why was that? Well, this writer at the Washington Post, and he's joined by an English writer from the Daily Mail, which is a London newspaper, and the two of them both say that Donald Trump's remarks the other night, repeated as they have been ad nauseum for a year, are no longer news. Why did they suddenly get so much attention? Because the fellow travelers in media, they want to promote their girl, and they were trying to obscure the fact that that day, James Comey, the director of the FBI, came forward, and Comey said she showed really bad judgment. And yes, some laws may have been broken, but they weren't going to indict. Media wanted to deflect your attention from that. They wanted to distract you from that. So in other words, they're trying to get her reelected. And what they had to do was suddenly go after Trump about something he's been saying for months already. Now, you've got two liberal newspapers admitting that, confessing that today. That's, to me, it tells you what we're really up against when we go into this election. Like every other Republican who's been running for a major office over the last 35 years, and maybe even longer than that now, they have not just their opponents in their opposition parties, but they also have to contend with media. So they're fighting wars on multiple fronts, if we can make an analogy. And it's not going to get any better. But if the public realizes that there are people out there trying to hoodwink us, as long as we can inform the public and allow them to know what the deviants, the moral reprobates in media are trying to do to Republican candidates, then perhaps we might just get a fair shake. It's 8:13. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Trump, by the way, speaking at a rally, joined by Newt Gingrich last night. I need to point out, coming up in just about an hour, one of Gingrich's closest friends, Phil Kent, is going to be joining us from Atlanta, Georgia. And he believes that Newt's the guy. Newt is going to be the vice presidential nominee. That's coming up, as I say, just after 9 o'clock news this morning. This is Trump, though, last night. And he appears to be hitting all the applause lines.
Because we're tired of incompetent people. We're tired of incompetent leadership and incompetent people. And Hillary Clinton, I said, bad judgment. She's incompetent, okay? She's incompetent. The only good thing she's ever done is get out of trouble when anybody else would have been in jail by now. That's the only thing that I've ever seen her do. That was a great job. I got to give her credit.
Keep repeating that and bring it up at debates and just hammer, 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 because when he hammers her during a debate, when they go face to face, her only response is going to be Atlantic City. And I'll tell you what, that will not set well with the American people. Thank you. And in Trump's case, it all seemed to get even better last night.
I got to give her credit. I got to give Bill Clinton credit for going to that plane and saying for 39 minutes he talked about his grandchildren and he talked about golf. There's no way you could do that. I told you, 2 minutes for the grandchildren, 2 minutes for golf. We got 35 or 36 minutes left. What are we going to... Let's talk about Hillary. And Hillary then talks about, I think I'd reappoint the Attorney General. And you're waiting for a decision by the Attorney General. And you're saying you're going to give her a job. You're not allowed to do that. That's bribery, folks. And then the Attorney General comes out, as Newt said, but the Attorney General comes out, and the Attorney General says, no charges. That's bribery. Wouldn't you say? That's bribery. You're not supposed... She said she's going to reappoint the Attorney General, and the Attorney General is waiting to make a determination as to whether or not she's guilty.
Yeah, the Attorney General immediately said, well, I want to thank the FBI for making a recommendation and telling me how to do my job, which is exactly what I was going to do in the first place. Right now, Comey is being interviewed by Elijah Cummings, who's a waste product, member of the House of Representatives from Maryland. And the two of them are chatting right now as we speak, and I'm sure Cummings is saying, let me kiss up to your backside for, carrying Hillary's water so our party, again, can destroy America. 816, and our telephone number if you'd like to reach the program, 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. You're up.
You know something? it seems as though every morning I wake up and hope to hear some news that would help the American people and America. And you say to yourself, will we ever get any justice? Is there any hope? And you're so pissed off, and you get tired of being mad, and you say, what a railroad job, James Comey, you gutless son of a what?
Yep.
Or whatever. And then Roberts on the Obamacare, you say, when are the people going to win? And again, you say, my God, we're going to storm the castle. Well, nobody's ever going to storm the castle, man. Even though we talk about it, we're armed infidels or whatever you want to call us. But you see, we just hope for some sort of justice, some sort of thing that will make us feel just a little bit better. And I don't know. You just cry out. And I'm going to hang up, Bill. See ya.
Hey, thank you much for the call. And you're echoing exactly what I was saying to a friend yesterday, having a conversation, and I said, I do this for a living, and I don't do it. I enjoy it. I mean, obviously that's one of the reasons I do it, but I also do it because I feel it is my duty. I could be doing a lot of other things, and I probably could be making a lot more money, if I was still, as television news director, managing newsrooms somewhere and listening to all the guff from the young millennials who think that they know everything. But instead, I choose to do this because I feel that it's a public service. I have to bring the alternative to people because otherwise they're not going to get the full story. And yet, you just see us take one hit after another. Obamacare in 2012. You saw the marriage ruling from the Supreme Court a year ago. You see the Supreme Court just, willy-nilly taking on cases and just deciding them and in ways that you realize will help destroy the country, that will accelerate that destruction. You see Comey coming out the other day and saying, there's two sets of laws in this country, and it's very depressing. But on the other hand, and this is what my friend shared with me, and he reminded me very strongly that the devil is going to win a lot of battles. The devil may win battle after battle after battle after battle, but in the long run, our guy still reigns victorious. And if you believe that and you still hold to that, all you can do is pray for the souls of these godless liberals who are trying to destroy this country and our culture, and realistically the world too, through their bad habits. Just think about what this country would look like if we ended up with a government like they have in Venezuela, and what that would mean for the rest of the world. And they are definitely, this is their battle plan. This is what we're up against. But if we pray for their souls, because right now they'd condemn themselves to hell, but if we pray for their souls, just possibly, we could start turning this around. We don't have a lot left in our quiver other than that. Think about it. Prayer's always the last resort, isn't it? 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, it's 61. Bill Colley. More on this subject coming up. I have another clip. Speaking of people echoing what I've been saying. Now, I know that Donald Trump's people are not listening to this little show in tiny Twin Falls, Idaho, but you remember earlier this week, I had a comment about the Star of David when they were saying, oh, Trump retweeted a photograph of Hillary Clinton and there was a 6-pointed star. That must be the Star of David, and he must be an anti-Semite and a bigot. I should note his Jewish son-in-law published a story yesterday saying, my father-in-law is not a bigot. In fact, he's a wonderful man, and he's been very helpful to people of all backgrounds and races who he's encountered in his work life. Trump, though, saying exactly what I was saying just the other day.
They took the star down. I said, too bad. You should have left it up. I would have rather defended it. Just leave it up and say, no, that's not a Star of David. That's just a star. I said, bad guy, really bad guy, but he was good at one thing. He killed terrorists. Next day, Donald Trump loves Saddam Hussein. I don't love Saddam Hussein. I hate Saddam Hussein.
In other words, you know what? The media is out to get me. He's not saying that. He's too polite, I guess, at this point to say that. Whoever accused Trump of being polite, I don't know. But I'm telling you right now, he can let the rest of us say it because it is so obvious. Do want to remind you, our friend Dr. Jonathan Tripp was in studio with us yesterday. I'll be getting to my telephone callers in just a moment, but Dr. Tripp is going away on an actual trip, a mission trip to Nicaragua with his family. But he said yesterday that they are no longer in any need of donated toiletries. They have so many, they don't know that they can get them all on the plane on the way out. But he does want to thank people who helped donate those, because where they're going, people are in desperate need of these things back in the jungles of Central America. I do want to point out his office is also looking for new patients. And if you're a patient of Dr. Tripp, you can generally, if you're feeling sick on a particular Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday, Friday morning, really any day, you can often see the doctor or one of his associates the very same day for treatment. He's located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office in Twin Falls. Caller, you're up next at 8:26 on Top Story on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. You mentioned a minute ago, what would it look like? The worst case scenario is Hillary as president, Wiley Bill as Secretary of State, and aloof Obama being nominated as the ambassador to the United Nations and cajoling everybody over there so that he is the director or president or whatever you call it of the United Nations.
And then look to expand his power there as well. Think about that. With the EU, and I thank you for the call, the EU doesn't seem to grasp that it turned into this big hydra that was trying to control all aspects of everyone's lives in its membership countries throughout Europe. I was watching an interview on BBC the other day with one of these French ministers, and she was just aghast that they would be rejected by another country. And he said, well, how about having a vote in France, to allow the people there? No, we can't do that. And the interviewer says, well, that doesn't sound very democratic. But they know in their hearts and their minds they are right and everybody else is wrong, and they are going to force you to get on board with their righteousness. That's what this is all about. I was watching a bit of Newsmax TV yesterday, and they were rerunning some of Ronald Reagan's greatest speeches. His first inaugural address, when he pointed out that these people believe that they somehow know better than the average, the common man and woman, how to run our lives and run government. But he went on to say, look, if they feel that the individual doesn't have the ability, then how can they themselves put themselves in charge? It's a contradiction. It doesn't make sense. But if the EU is grasping for more and more and more power, and it's they're ready for war, for crying out loud, because the British are going to be walking away. Can you imagine how bad things could get at the United Nations if you have a megalomaniac like Barack Hussein Obama in charge? That'll go the same direction. And then they'll start trying to dictate to you how you're going to live, right down to your neighborhood level. 8:28, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Before today's hearing, as I mentioned, Jason Chaffetz, congressman from Utah, is presiding over this hearing today with James Comey. He was answering some questions last night about exactly what the whole nature of this is.
Obviously, what Secretary Clinton said time and time again, both under oath, by the way, and in the public, turned out to be not true. And so there was a lot of misleading information. We're just simply trying to expose and get to the truth. We want to understand the difference in his mind between gross negligence, which is in the statute, and extremely careless.
And again, the director of the FBI cannot rewrite the statute as he attempted to do by saying, well, I didn't see the intent here. There's nothing about intent in there. Nothing. You get it? Because, gross negligence. If I'm driving down the road and I don't intend to run over a baby carriage with a baby inside it, but I still do it, I'm going to go to jail. And they're going to say, well, Bill, you were texting, or you were swatting at a fly, or you were trying to change the radio station. Well, if I was listening to us, I certainly wouldn't be. But they would say that, and I would still have some responsibility for my actions, even though I didn't intend to do that. Comey rewrote the law on his own. That is not his job. It is not his responsibility. That law was written by the members of Congress. They wrote that specifically for that reason, and then he went and blew it off. 8:30, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX at newsradio1310.com. Phil Kent will be joining us following 9 o'clock news, as I mentioned earlier. Phil is a close friend of Newt Gingrich, and he believes Newt's going to be the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party. Details on that in just about 40 minutes. Right now, it's 62. Hey, wanted to thank you for joining us this morning. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And I wanted to mention, too, just after 9 o'clock this morning, we'll be joined by Phil Kent. Phil Kent has a long resume, not only in Washington, but as a journalist. He was the editor of a newspaper in Augusta, Georgia for many years, and then was the president of the State Associated Press in Georgia. He used to work on Capitol Hill for a U.S. senator from South Carolina, and he got to know a fellow from Georgia, and a fellow Georgian by the name of Newt Gingrich. Well, they're both transplants. Gingrich grew up in Pennsylvania, and Phil grew up in the Finger Lakes region of New York, but they're both transplants and have been good friends for many years. Phil is going to join us after 9 o'clock news. According to Phil, he thinks it is likely going to be Gingrich as the vice presidential. He said he talked to him just a few days ago that Gingrich will be the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party, and that's coming up in just a few days in Cleveland, Ohio. It's 8:45. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. If you'd like to reach our program today, 736-0300, 736-0300. We're in the mid-60s right now, likely on our way, starting to warm back up the next couple of days after a couple of cooler days. I just want to remind people listening to this program, if I lost my voice, I'd be concerned, but if I couldn't hear what I was saying, I'd be very concerned as well. And when it comes to radio, you don't have many other options. You can't read my lips. So if you're having hearing difficulties, we recommend you see Dr. Christine Pickup, the only locally owned independent hearing healthcare practice in southern Idaho right now at this point. That's Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. And she'd like to remind you that with advances in healthcare, people are living longer and actually much healthier lives. However, cognitive decline continues to be a major concern. People with hearing loss have a much greater risk of developing cognitive decline, which can lead to dementia. The greater the loss, the greater the risk. Keeping your hearing healthy, that's an important part of your overall wellness. Knowing your hearing status and doing something about it can lead to a better, healthier life as you age. Now is the time to schedule a hearing evaluation. You can call Mount Harrison Audiology for an appointment. And Dr. Pickup's number is 208-312-0957. We were talking earlier this morning about this whole situation. Comey is still testifying on Capitol Hill. He's the FBI director. And I believe there's a senator, or rather a House member from Tennessee who right now is questioning him. I can't actually, speaking of hearing, I don't have the, closed captioning up. I'm looking at my TV monitor as I speak. And so I don't know what's been said so far. But they're trying to find out why Comey made the decision not to recommend an indictment of Hillary Clinton. When he stated for 10 minutes, I have all of this evidence that she indeed broke the law. So it's a very good question that he needs to answer for these people. It's 8:47 now. Bill Colley with you. Meanwhile, among her fellow Democrats, there is some concern about all of this. But at this stage of the game, as they're headed towards the Democrat Party convention in Philadelphia in August, her primary opponent, Bernie Sanders, well, he was one of several, but the others didn't last very long. Bernie Sanders was on CNN yesterday with the Roman gnome, Wolf Blitzer, and I've got to tell you, Bernie Sanders sounds at this point as if he's a whipped man, as if they've beaten him down to the point where he really doesn't have a whole lot left.
So the question is, do you have confidence in the way Hillary Clinton handled classified information during her 4 years as Secretary of State?
I think what the FBI report said is there were serious problems. And, that's what the case was.
Because the Speaker of the House today, Paul Ryan, said he doesn't think she should have access to classified information. If she's the Democratic nominee, as you know, both candidates get classified briefings on a daily basis after the convention.
What we can be 100% assured of is the Republicans will politicize this issue, and they will do everything they can to keep it in the papers.
But Comey was very tough on her.
He was, all right, and that's his job, to be objective, to be fair, and I think he did what appears to me to be a serious investigation.
Well, it is called politics, so when he says the Republicans will do everything they can to politicize the issue, number one, I'm not surprised. Number two, had this been, I don't know, one of the attorney generals working for President George W. Bush, and all of this had transpired, the Democrats wouldn't just say, well, okay, we've got a decision now from the FBI. We'll just walk away and leave it there. Yeah, we won't bother with it. How about Richard Nixon, Republican president? Did they walk away from that and say there was nothing to see here? Or was it politicized? Give me a break. So, they say these things, and that's a little code word there. They think they're putting one over on you, but we understand exactly what they mean. They're trying to say the other guys are just being mean to us. Look, If you were being mean, you'd get 4 guys killed in Benghazi by leaving them hanging and burning and being shot up. That would be being mean. I think that actually saying to the FBI director, exactly how did you come to the conclusion, despite what the law says, to decide not to indict or to recommend no indictment? I think that's a fair question. And I think that the American people should have a need to know. And maybe he has a reasonable expectation or explanation. And that is likely. I didn't want to interfere with this year's presidential election. I thought, therefore, that if we had a criminal elected as president, that would be the voters' choice, and I shouldn't have anything to say with it. Who else is he going to ignore in the future when it comes to crime? That's the big question right now. Speaking of this, Fox News, you may have already seen this, you may have heard it. Fox News put together a montage of Hillary Clinton's repeated denials, and they juxtaposed this with Comey's news conference the other day. Take a listen for a moment and see if you find her any more trustworthy.
Nothing that I sent or received was marked classified, and nothing has been demonstrated to contradict that.
7 email chains concern matters that were classified at the top secret special access program at the time they were sent and received.
I thought it would be easier to carry just one device for my work and for my personal emails instead of 2.
Secretary Clinton used several different servers and administrators of those servers during her 4 years at the State Department. And she also used numerous mobile devices to send and to read email on that personal domain.
The system we used was set up for President Clinton's office, and it had numerous safeguards, and there were no security breaches.
It is possible that hostile actors gained access to Secretary Clinton's personal email account.
Did you try to wipe the whole server? You didn't answer the question.
I'm not, I have no idea. That's why we turned it over.
You were in charge of it. You were the official in charge. Did you wipe the server?
What, like with a cloth or something?
It's also likely that there are other work-related emails that they did not produce to State and that we did not find elsewhere and that are now gone because they deleted all emails they did not produce to State, and the lawyers then cleaned their devices in such a way as to preclude complete forensic recovery.
Now, how would that have been any different if Richard Nixon had decided to burn the White House tapes? How would media have reacted? How would the public have reacted? By wiping away, deleting emails and wiping clean these servers, it's the same thing, isn't it? So there's no smoking gun there because they went ahead and they obstructed justice. That's what they did. And he says, well, we couldn't determine intent. Hello? 8:51. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com at 65. Thank you for joining us this morning. Telephone number, if you'd like to reach our program, 736-0300. Steve Berman, writing at theresurgent.com today, says, where's the outrage? And he mentions the case. Remember the case in Florida where George Zimmerman got into a wrestling match with Trayvon Martin. Martin ended up dead. And of course, liberals screamed and yelled and called for riots in the streets. How about in Baltimore, where they went out and burned half the city down after a local dope dealer was killed in the back of a police van last year because he apparently bounced around a little too much on his way to the precinct. And now you've got people ready to riot in Minnesota and in Louisiana and claiming, oh, this is all terrible. But how about in the Clinton case? Where's the outrage? Because you've got, again, 4 people dead in Benghazi. And the only reason this whole email thing came to the surface was because of the Benghazi investigation, which media said, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to see here. Well, how come people aren't rioting in the streets over all of this? Lefty apparently doesn't see this as being an issue because Hillary Clinton told him, tell you what, you vote for me, you'll get your free lunch. And Lefty thought, who cares about somebody being killed and somebody lying as long as I can keep feeding at the public trough at somebody else's expense. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story. Hello? All right, we'll give it 3 seconds. Knock, knock, nobody home. 736-0300. That's 736-0300 if you'd like to reach the program. My email address is bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. That's bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. And it does come down to that. If you're a Democrat, you're thinking, what do I get? It's not about the country. It's about going out there and feeding at the public trough no matter what it costs the country. Whether we print money or borrow money and go trillions of dollars in debt and threaten our future, it's all about what do I get? And Hillary Clinton, on the same night that she was supposed to be cleared by Comey, went out and told a crowd that she was going to give them all free college. At whose expense? There is nothing free out there. But Democrats lapped it up. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. You're on the air generally means that.
Well, we know there's a double standard, but at some point you have to wonder, all these people in the media and that revolve around, I cringe to even call them the Democrat Party anymore because I don't know what they are. They're like a leftist organization anymore. But
it's a criminal enterprise.
Exactly. And the thing is, you have to ask yourself, what are they getting out of it to support such dishonesty and corruption? They must be gaining something, or they wouldn't continue to support this.
These are people without any moral foundation. For crying out loud, they booed God at their last convention.
Exactly. But I'm talking about the people in the media, and the under people, that are supporting all this. A great deal of them must just not have much, brain power going on. But
well, they think everybody else should be getting a free lunch. In their view, everyone else is bad. Republicans and Whitey has been an oppressor for all of these years. It will make things right if we just keep giving out free lunches, and they don't have any understanding of the cost.
Well, the day will come when when they start stepping on their toes, and they won't like it, and there won't be anything they can do about it at that point.
Yeah, well, take a look at some of those old videos, the madness of I think it's a lost society. There's several of those videos out there. Thank you for the call, where people are trampling each other the morning after Thanksgiving at Walmart to get a $10 toaster made by a slave laborer in China. That's what we're dealing with. And when that happens, when it all comes crashing down, they'll be knocking down your door to take what you have. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Hi, Bill.
Morning. Go ahead.
I am completely concerned about Hillary. I mean, I just barely watched the movie 13 Hours this weekend. And when I was overseas in Iraq, whenever we had issues and we were worried that we might be overrun, we always brought in an F-16 for a low flyby. And that did put the fear of God into them. And they wouldn't even do that for the men on the ground in Benghazi.
Well, from
Sicily. They were scared to have boots on the ground.
From Sicily, it was just a matter of minutes to have that flyover.
Yes, I know. It doesn't take them long to get there.
Right.
20 minutes, they could have been there.
Wow.
20 minutes, those guys were waiting just to go save the ambassador.
Well,
finally, they said, the hell with it, and took it up in their own hands, and 2 of them died for doing it.
Keep in mind, we may have 4 more years, maybe even 8 more years of this. You got to ask if the country can survive it.
Militarily wise, no, they can't. There's
Well
no
said.
strategy when it comes to Obama or Hillary.
Well, remember what her husband once said, I loathe the military. I thank you very much for the call, and I thank you for your service. And it's good to get someone who's got a little insight into this, who actually has experienced what we're talking about and can offer that up. We've got a short break coming up in just a couple of minutes, and that is for news from Fox at 9 o'clock. I'll get back to more of your telephone calls in the next hour. Just want to remind you, though, have a guest coming up, and probably not going to take a lot of telephone calls for him because we always get those statement callers. You get a guest on for 12 minutes, and the statement caller wants to call up and eat up 4 minutes of that. And so generally I just stick with the guest, throw my questions out, and do a little Q&A, and then we'll take some follow-up after he's off air. But Phil Kent joining us, friend of Newt Gingrich, says Gingrich is the guy. Gingrich is going to be the Republican nominee, the choice of Donald Trump for vice president. That's coming up in just a few minutes following news, right here on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 66. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story.